From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Cheers, Ollie. Thanks very much. Welcome to Wednesday's programme. How you doing? Rain, and more rain in Manchester. Miserable all day. And it's fairly depressing. It's getting dark at like 4:30, but I suppose that's the way it is at this time of year. Hope you're well.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show. It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Welcome. I've got a terrific program lined up for you this Wednesday. We will talk about the midterm elections with Dean Henderson, who will join me live from Missouri in the second hour. I don't think I need to tell you too much about Dean Henderson, top man. And I'll also be joined by Russ Martin. Now, Russ joins me this hour. He's got a first-hand experience, or he has first-hand experience of care proceedings in this country. And I invited Russ to join me because it's been announced today by the BBC and many other networks and newspapers and what have you that there will be, or there has been, a steep rise in vulnerable children needing protection over the last 10 years. And that is pushing council children's services in England into crisis and breaking points. There has been a substantial increase in calls from the public and professionals worried about children. And that's according to a study for the Association of Directors of Children's Services. Why is that? Why has there been more and more calls from members of the public for the councils around this country to intervene in the family? Russ Martin joins me this hour. Excuse me, there's mad stuff going on in the studio while I'm talking to you. I've had an engineer here who's just leaving, changing broadband provider and updating the systems here in the studio today. Russ Martin joins me this hour, and Dean Henderson joins me from Missouri in the second hour. We're live right now on Fab Radio 2, TuneIn Radio, triggerwarning.tv, and of course richieallen.co.uk. It's always good to be with you, and if you've got something to contribute to the programme, you can do so during the live show by tweeting at Richie Allen Show. I say during the live show because people hear it, of course, later on as it repeats, and people hear it on podcast and on iTunes and think it's live then and send tweets with comments, which I don't get. But between 5 and 7 UK time, that's GMT, the programme is live and your participation is more than welcome. All right. So the midterms then. I'm laughing at this. I'm still coughing, by the way. I'm laughing at this. The midterms. Blanket coverage of this in the UK news today. Very interesting. Donald Trump is saying it's been a major victory for him because even though the Democrats seized the Congress, House of Representatives, Republicans held on to the Senate. What does it mean? It means nothing. I have believed for many years now. I shouldn't say that I've been saying for many years now, even though I have been, because who the hell am I that you should listen to me? That's a very good question, that. Who the hell am I that you should pay any attention to what I say? But I have believed for many years that going to a ballot box, whether it be in Manchester, whether it be in London, Skegness, Milton Keynes, Liverpool, Las Vegas, Chechnya, if you go and cast your vote in an election, you are basically complying with and contractually agreeing with your own slavery, handing the rights to other people, usually multimillionaires, to tell you what you can do and when you can do it. And that's the way it is. It's nonsense. But what's making me laugh today, and it is very funny, is that the alternative right supporters and the supporters of Donald Trump are losing their collective shit today. They're properly losing it. Let me read you a tweet from Laura Loomer, who's an alt-right Zionist, calls herself a journalist, probably couldn't spell the word. Laura Loomer. Nothing remotely resembling a journalist. Listen to this. This makes me laugh. It's all about Muslim women. Laura Loomer. I just can't stop crying for the Jews and Christians in this country. I can't believe so many people voted for anti-Semites and people who don't believe Jews and Christians have a right to exist. It honestly breaks my heart. We need a miracle. Sharia is here in America. Right. And there was a lot of that today. Why? Excuse me. Well, because the US elected its first Muslim women to Congress. A woman in Michigan called Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar from Minnesota. Oh. Ms. Tlaib is a Palestinian American, and she secured Michigan's 13th congressional district in a race in which she was the sole major party candidate, having won the Democratic primary earlier in the year. That meant that she was the shoo-in, this woman, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. She's in. And what am I talking? I've given it. Yeah, of course I've read it wrong, haven't I? I've read my own notes wrong. Lest I misguide you and lest I misinform you, let me go back again and say that. Rashida Tlaib won the Michigan congressional seat in a race in which she was the only candidate. So she was a shoo-in. She's the Palestinian American woman. I'll tell you more about her in a minute. And in Minnesota, Somali American Ilhan Omar grabbed the seat that had previously been held by somebody called Keith Ellison. He was the first Muslim congressman. She's replaced him. She's the first Muslim congresswoman to be voted in Minnesota. That's right. It can be confusing. In fact, it's not confusing. I'm making it confusing. Anyway, like I said, people are losing their collective shit. They are. Omar in Minnesota ran on a platform that included Medicare for all, criminal justice reform, and abolishing immigration and customs enforcement. And that's why Trump supporters and alt-right followers, I suppose, or alt-right identitarians are losing it because of the immigration stuff that she's been talking about. Rashid Tlaib, have I said that right again? I'm not doing well here, am I? This is not a good moment for me. It's Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, is the daughter of Palestinian immigrants, and she said in recent interviews that she favours a one-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and she has supported the free speech rights of BDS activists who push for boycotts, divestment and sanctions against Israel. So the US has elected its first Muslim women, and it's not going down well amongst the alt-right heroes of the truther industrial complex and supporters of Donald Trump. But I like the sounds of, I like the sound even of Rashida Tlaib, or Tlaib, I can't pronounce it, Tlaib. I've heard various pronunciations today. Like the sound of her, Palestinian parents. She's for BDS and for a single state, a one-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian question. Right. Anyway, what a mess I made of that, but there you are. I think you understand it anyway. Now, speaking of Israel, this is something I've been following for the last couple of days. And I mentioned on the programme yesterday, as I was closing it out, that I might be speaking to a University of Sussex former professor. Now, he's not going to be on the programme, but let me tell you a little bit about him. He is Professor Kees van der Pijl, or Van der Pijl, that's P-I-J-L. Now, he was formerly the head of the University of Sussex International Relations Department. He's retired, but he's caused a bit of a Twitter storm, and he's made it into the national press here in the UK. Why? Because he tweeted a couple of days ago, not Saudis, but Israelis blew up the Twin Towers with help from Zionists in the US government. So he retired back in 2012. He's living in Amsterdam now, and this has gone viral. The Independent newspaper, the Daily Mail, have been all over this story. Now, he has Professor Emeritus status with the university, which retiring professors have conferred on them automatically. But a Jewish group in Sussex called the Sussex Jewish Representative Council, well, they want the university to strip him of his emeritus status, saying that this type of hate-mongering has no place in society, least of all in academia. So he tweeted out that Israel did it, not the Saudis, and that the Mossad were behind the September the 11th attacks. It's interesting, the reaction to this type of thing is pretty uniform and it's pretty standard. The Zionist groups come out very quickly to demand that the man is stripped of any association with the university, and they demand that he is silenced, but they're not demanding from him evidence. I always find that very interesting. Why the Zionist groups in the UK are not saying, so you say that Israel had some hand in 9/11. Where's your evidence, Professor? No, they don't say that. They demand that he be shut down. For the Sussex Jewish groups, I have this to say to you. I've got 2 words for you. Dancing Israelis. I'm not going to say any more on that. Now, I got in touch with Professor Van der Peel, and he's been very nice. He's swapped emails with me over the last day or two. He has expressed interest in coming on the programme, but at the moment, Sussex University have, it seems, decided to open an investigation and have decided to review his Professor Emeritus status. While that's going on, he has communicated to me, the Professor, that he would prefer not to do any live radio, but he's expressed serious interest in coming on when this dies down or blows over. So read into that what you like. I like the guy. I'm happy for him to come on, but that's what he said. Spoke to you about this briefly yesterday, okay? Professor Kees van der Peel, now based in Amsterdam, tweeted that Israel, not the Saudis, blew up the Twin Towers with help from Zionists in the US government. He's now being investigated for that. Sussex-based Jewish groups have said this is hate-mongering. Is it? If there's any truth to it, of course, it isn't hate-mongering. Anyway, like I said, it's interesting. They don't ask him for any evidence to substantiate his claims. Rather, they call for his marginalisation. 16 minutes past the hour. Wednesday's programme, 7th of November 2018. Do you know what I've done, by the way? Not done this for a long time. I've pretty much cut sugar out of my diet, like a lot of people, because of concerns that it, well, for obvious reasons, we don't want to be including too much sugar-based products in our diet for obvious reasons around obesity, around gaining weight, around diabetes and all of that. But we also think the big C, don't we? But before coming on the air, I had a large bottle of a fizzy drink which has sugar in it. And I'm feeling quite fine. I'm feeling fine and dandy, thank you. But it's definitely giving me the shakes. It's an interesting one. Right? So maybe I won't do that again in a hurry. This is the Richie Allen Show. Let me move on to the next story. This is fascinating. Found this on the Daily Mail this afternoon. Headline: pensioner 69 who identifies as a 45-year-old begins legal action to have his age reduced so that he can attract more women on Tinder. This isn't a joke, and it isn't April 1st. 69-year-old man who identifies as 45 years old has launched legal action to reduce his age so that he can attract more women on Tinder. Shall I read you a little bit of this for the crack? So a 69-year-old Dutchman is battling to reduce his age by 20 years so that he can get more work and attract more women on Tinder. His name is Emil Rattleband, and he argues that if transgender people are allowed to change sex, he should be allowed to change his date of birth, because doctors have said he's got the body of a 45-year-old. Now, he's a motivational speaker and a media personality in the Netherlands, which is a big red flag. Maybe this is bullshit. Maybe this is all to do with drawing attention to himself. Whether it is or not, the fact is he is suing his local authority because they refused to amend his age on official documents, which of course they can't do. He was born in March of 1949, says he feels 20 years younger, wants to change his birth date to March 11th, 1969. Rattleband has converted to Buddhism, said I have done a checkup and my biological age is 45 years. When I'm 69, I'm limited. If I'm 49, I can buy a new house, drive a different car and take up more work. When I'm on Tinder and it says I'm 69, I don't get any answers. When I'm 49, with the face I have, I will be in a luxurious position. Transgender people can now have their gender changed on their birth cert, and in the same spirit, there should be room for an age change. The Dutchman said he is discriminated against because of his age on a daily basis. He said companies are reluctant to hire someone the age of a pensioner as a consultant. That's a serious issue, I suppose, and we've talked about that before. He also says his move would be good news for the government as he would be renouncing his pension until he reaches retirement age again. This is a publicity stunt for this guy who is a media personality. It's either that or he wants to have a dig at the transgender lobby. Is there some merit to that? If you're going to allow people to say that they spontaneously change their sex, change their gender, why can't I lower my age if a doctor gives me a bill of health and says that I am operating at the age of a man 20 years my junior? Thought that was funny. 20 minutes past the hour. Tweet the programme. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. At Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Hi to Dean Smith. How you doing, Dean? Number of people, by the way, have tweeted me this afternoon to ask me, why am I not talking about the EU army story? Because David Davis has been talking about the EU army. Because Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has been calling for an EU army. Because it's not new. This isn't news. European leaders, Europhiles, EU bigwigs have been mooting the creation of not only an EU border force but an EU army for years. It was always meant to come to pass, right? As the European Union was sold to people on the basis of, way back when, it'll be great for trade between countries, it'll be great for cooperation between countries, and it'll be great in terms of peace and security. We'll never see another Second World War. Everything will be hunky-dory. That's how it was sold. Not going to give you a big lecture on this. We've done this to death. But it was really about ever-increasing political, fiscal, and ultimately military union. And many learned men and women have been on this programme talking about that, and particularly the EU army aspect of it for many years. This is not news. You know, I'm stunned regularly by the obtuse attitude of left-wing people and left-wing party supporters who are all in favour of the European Union and all in favour of reversing the referendum result of 2 years ago. How little they actually know about what the European Union is and what it will be as it progresses. It's a fascist superstate designed to end sovereignty and make one gigantic state controlled from Brussels. And ultimately there will be several of these around the world. And eventually the several unions will seed into a global governance, a global government. That's what it's all about. And of course they want to police this with an EU army. Of course they want an EU reactionary force to replace the armies of sovereign states. It's been long planned, this. It's not news when Macron says, I fancy this should happen. This isn't news. because some mainstream light media organisations and some mainstream light website magazines are now talking about it doesn't mean that it's news. It ain't news. It's very serious, believe you me, but it ain't news. I'm going to take some music now. When I come back from that, we're going to introduce our first guest, and we're going to talk about news today about the dramatic increase in members of the public and other organisations reporting that a child is in danger and that the local authority needs to intervene. This is serious stuff. We don't often get a male perspective on this, but I will be joined in a couple of minutes' time by a fascinating man whom I've been speaking to on Twitter, who not only has his own story to tell, but works with people who have gone through this. Russ Martin joins me in a couple of minutes' time after this from Bachman Turner Overdrive. So it's the Richie Allen Show then for Wednesday, November 7th, 2018. Welcome to the show. Russ Martin joins me soon, and in the second hour, Dean Henderson will wing his way in from Missouri. Don't miss that. Back in 2 minutes. Music from Bachman Turner Overdrive on the Richie Allen Show. 26 minutes past the hour. Let's move on because I want to spend as much time this hour with my guest as I possibly can. I mentioned at the top of the programme, this is covered by BBC TV and radio today, that there has been a very steep rise in vulnerable children who need protection over the last 10 years. And the BBC reported this is pushing the children's services at local authorities into crisis. And research will be published on this tomorrow, Thursday. The claims are that there's been a substantial increase in calls from the public and professionals worried about a child. So plainly speaking, this is people calling local authorities to report that they are worried about the welfare of a child. The study has been commissioned by and carried out by the Association of Directors of Children's Services. So the BBC reports the number of investigations where a child is believed to be at risk of significant harm has more than doubled. And in the last year, nearly 2.4 million people contacted Children's Services because they were worried about a child. Imagine that. Think about that. In a country of just over 60 million. 2.4 million people in the last year contacted Children's Services saying they were worried about a child. That's a 78% increase on 10 years ago. Wow. Subject that I've been covering for about 3.5 years now with various guests. We've heard from women, mostly women and men who've been through this system, who've had a child removed from their care, and it's a dreadful thing. I've never experienced it, but I can only imagine how dreadful it is. Let's welcome our first guest. I connected to him on social media. He's a parent and he's got first-hand experience of care proceedings. Not only that, but he works supporting families going through it, and he's campaigning for family law and child protection system reform. He trains and coaches survivors as well. Let's welcome to the programme Russ Martin. Russ, I'm delighted you've come on, mate. You're very welcome. How are you?
Yeah, hi Richie. Yeah, thanks for having me. Really looking forward to it.
Great to have you on. Were you at all surprised, Russ, to learn that 2.4 million people phoned a local authority last year to claim that they believe there needs to be an intervention and to claim that there is a child at risk? That sounds like a staggering number. Did it surprise you at all?
It is surprising. Bearing in mind we're in the 21st century, 2018, and we seem to be going backwards. I thought we might be all a bit more educated these days.
Massive number. I mean, in the context of the population of the country, 2.4 million to phone up. Do we have any sort of idea at all, Russ? I know the research is published tomorrow. We haven't seen anything in the BBC story. But what sorts of things do we think people are reporting? If somebody phones up their local authority, what are they telling these authorities about children? What are they claiming? Do we know?
Well, I think part of the problem is we've become a society that is risk adverse. we're so risk adverse now, it's almost we're scared of our own shadows. So it seems to be society's changing. If you even go into the GP surgery or a clinic, there's signs up mentioning social services and child protection. So there's quite a hype on it at the moment.
That's an amazing thing, Russ. I've come across that. There are posters urging people to make reports or to make contact. So the scary posters asking people if they see a child that they think is in danger to contact the local authority. Now that might sound like a good thing, but often these posters are followed by, or you will see another poster which is urging people to get in touch with an organisation if they want to become foster parents. And often these posters talk about the possibility of earning up to £500-600 a week. So that's where it gets a bit sinister for me. So what we think might be happening is people might be ringing up. I mean, 2.4 million calls. There's got to be a lot of people ringing up for very innocuous reasons, I'm guessing.
Yes. What concerns me with that is the quality of those calls, and from my own personal perspective and my own encounter with the system as such, is how they actually investigate these calls and how they actually investigate the allegations made. And
I really want to hear about what happened to you, because I'm fascinated by it. What happened, Russ? How did this whole area of child protection and child protective services, how did it land in your lap? Tell us about your own experience.
Well, what happened, I actually went to social services for help for my wife because she had some mental health issues regarding coping with our son. And at first, they were very helpful, very supportive, and they basically went away and left us alone. And then in 2007, late 2007, they got involved again. But this time they wanted to take our son. And between 2007 and 2010, they tried 3 times to take him under Section 47 and failed every time. In fact, they actually breached Section 47 on the 3 occasions.
You went for help, Russ. Let's talk about this. Your wife was going through a bad time, and I don't know if it was postnatal depression or something like that. Yes,
it's partly to do with postnatal depression.
Was it? Which is common, isn't it? A lot of women go through that, and I've within my own family over the years I've heard, that aunts and that have gone through that. You needed a bit of support yourself. So you went for a bit of advice, and they seemed to be that seemed to be productive, and they seemed to be helpful, and all of that. But then later on they came back. Why? And how old was your son at that stage? He
was 7 then, just turned 7, and basically they were hell bent on taking him away. At no time were they focusing on the problem, let's say, like the mental health issue. There was no help from mental health services, and frankly, the social workers involved didn't have a clue about mental health.
That's amazing. What reason did they give for the reintroduction, for them turning up again a few years later?
It was through the GP. What tends to go on is I would call it surveillance, subtle surveillance. Within the system. So you've got GPs, paediatricians, they can at any time make a referral to social services. And they do get involved, more so these days. But the issue I had with them, immediately we discovered that they were not investigating the situation. They were not investigating allegations made or third-party information, and we actually made complaints about it. And between 2007 and 2010, we made 5 complaints, official complaints, And it ended, they lost every case, and it actually ended with the judge on numerous occasions stating to them, leave this family alone, you're causing more damage than good.
Wow.
And this particular social services team ended up being investigated, because I put another, when we won the case again the last time, I made a formal complaint again, and that initiated an investigation on the team. I met with the investigative team and in October 2010, and the investigation was initiated.
How stressful was all of that, Russ?
Very
I can't imagine how
very
stressful it was.
At the time, I had my own business. I was being pulled left, right and centre. I had to take a lot of time off. But they weren't interested in that. It's all process. It's a bureaucratic system. It's very heavy laden with bureaucracy, and they don't seem to, well, from my own experience, they don't seem to want to show any empathy towards the people involved. And it's heart-wrenching.
Can I get this straight? So your wife has been dealing with some mental health issues, and maybe you said you went to get some advice about that. They were helpful. Initially they were helpful, but later on, because of something that was said to them by your GP, presumably because obviously your GP would have known about your contact with social services originally, and maybe were your wife's, I don't want to be too personal, but were her mental health problems kind of ongoing? Was it an ongoing thing she was dealing with?
Yes.
Right. And she was getting help. She was getting help for that. And I don't want to be too personal, but she wasn't in any way physically abusive to the boy or anything like that.
No, but that's what the issue was.
There was an allegation.
They were trying to say that our son was being abused.
Wow.
He at the time he actually had when he was younger he had a bit of a constipation problem, which we were going to the GP or the paediatrician about and working through that, and he obviously got better. But they seen that in another way.
But you're the boy's father, and you're there, and you're going to be looking out for your wife, of course, because you love your wife, and you're going to be looking out for your son, and you're not going to, if your wife was feeling bad enough, or if she was in such a bad way that she was to be physically abusive with the boy, that's something that you are going to take care of. That's what you would do as a dad, and vice versa if the roles were reversed there. So the doctor must have said, well, I think maybe that the mum might be lashing out at the boy, and therefore there might need to be some intervention. Is that what happened?
Well, no. What happened over the period of time? Social services got back involved, and like the paediatrician said, when the case got closed down, he said, "Well, there wasn't a case in the first place."
Yeah.
And like the Kafka's officer, the Guardian, really good guy. He was very supportive, and he always used to say, "Well, where's the balance of risk? Where's the fire? Why are you treating these people like this?" And he would question it, and it was a combination of things. My wife had previous dealings with social services with her other children, so I think that played a part in it. But for me personally, I think it's because I stood up, I sort of pushed back, I complained in a proper measured way. I made official complaints because I was not happy with the way they were treating us, the lack of communication, the lack of investigative skills, and.
Did you feel, Russ, that I've asked this before? It's a very loaded question, and some of my listeners will think this is a very, it's a question that maybe I shouldn't ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I've asked it before. Did you get the sense that they targeted your son? that, because I've heard this from parents before, that some people believe that there are social workers working around the country that are looking for children to take.
Yeah, let me answer that, Richie, because it goes on from here, but I'll explain it a bit more later. But when you get, you're in a courtroom and you take a break from the courtroom and you've got all solicitors involved saying the same thing. Yes, we've got no doubt whatsoever they've got a campaign against your family.
Yeah. Then
I have to say, well, yes, in this particular case.
And let me just jump in there again, and I'll be criticised for jumping in, but I don't want to, and I'm going to shut up now in a second. But about your wife's previous relationship, can I make the assumption, and again, with the utmost respect to your wife, who I don't know obviously, but the utmost respect, but I have mental illness in my own family. You know, every one of us has somebody that we love who's gone through it. Can I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that previously your wife has suffered from depression, and that's why her children from another relationship, that's why she was investigated or looked at before? Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, she's had a history of.
Yeah, I've heard this so many times. You see,
mental health difficulties, and they totally ignored it. Well, I say they ignored it. I think then they're not aware of it. They don't even look at the issue. They don't look at the problem at hand. They just focus on the child. And when I always remember, as if it was yesterday, when the senior social worker visited our home and, rubbing her hands, walked over to a picture of our son saying, "Oh, he's a lovely boy. I've got a place for him." And quite shocking, really.
That's incredible. And the reason I asked about your wife's other family, her presumably your stepchildren, is that again, it's been conveyed to me by people, not just victims of the family court system, but by other journalists who can't, because of the newspapers they work for, who can't write about this stuff but want to write about it. They believe that there is targeting ongoing of families where there has been a history of depression. We're not talking about people who have beaten their children or who've been screaming abuse at their children or anything like that, just people that have a history of depression. Because when somebody is identified as a parent who has had mental health issues, that's almost like an easy mark then for the social workers, because they can introduce risk of future emotional harm. You see, and again, I've come across this so often. It staggers me, this idea that somebody has been dealing with these issues, mental health issues, depression, or similar mental health problems, and that person can be labelled as maybe a future risk to a child. So now we have to intervene. That's what we're talking about here, right?
That's right. Well, in our case, it wasn't actually future emotional harm. It wasn't emotional harm, but not future emotional harm, if that makes sense.
Right.
But it did go on from there because they lost the case, basically, again, and left us alone. But then they suddenly took our son into foster care.
Hang on a second. So they lost the case. They wanted to take the boy into care. And they lost this. So presumably the judge who heard that said, this is a nonsense, and dismissed it. But yet they came back. How did they manage to do that?
Well, what happened, and this hasn't been, this is still under the radar, all this. This is it's a massive scandal, basically. What happened was they took our son into protective custody. The next day, we had to go to court, and the local authority applied for an emergency protection order and lost. They lost and had to return our son.
How did they come and get your son?
They basically turned out with the police.
With the police. Jesus Christ.
Took him away. And my wife phoned me. I was in work at the time, just packing up to come home, and she's crying her eyes out, crying and bawling, saying, they took him. I said, well, what do you mean? Who's took who? What? And she tells me the police have turned up with a social worker, and they've took him into protective custody.
You must have lost your mind, Russ, when you heard that.
Oh, it's been terrible. And it sort of didn't end there. It turned into tragedy, absolute tragedy. They lost, basically. The next day, they had to return our son immediately, which they did. Then the next day, we thought, well, we'll get on with our lives. And lo and behold, the police turned up with a social worker. I was in work, actually, with my son at the time, and another call from the wife saying, the police are here with a social worker. Can you come home? It's a welfare visit. So got home, and
But that's harassment, Russ. That is targeted harassment, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly what I said at the time. And the police, in fact, I knew one of the police officers because I work in the loss prevention security industry. I knew one of the CID officers, 2 CID officers it was. Anyway, I made a complaint to the police about it. I said, look, this is harassment. Who's ordered this? And even the social worker at the time said, well, this is very unusual to lose a EPO, as it's called, an emergency protection order, and
to come back 24 hours later.
Come back in 24 hours for a social welfare check. So that was that. And then on the Sunday they had to come back, which I agreed to, and I met them in the afternoon, and the social worker didn't show up. It was just the 2 police officers, and they said, we reported your concerns to our superior officer. So, and that was that. But then there was
the boy was 7 years old at this stage.
Well, he wasn't 7 then. He was 8 then.
He was 8 then, so he's 8. So he can speak, right? So presumably he's saying, "Listen, I'm fine here. I don't want to be taken away from my mum."
Well, it ended in tragedy. Over the next 2 weeks, we ended up with all sorts of threats. We had 3 consecutive phone calls, well, my wife did at the time, threatening to take our son. And she was getting worse and worse. She's like, basically the bottom line is she got pushed over the edge. She got pushed over the edge, and she basically tried to kill herself and our son.
Jesus Christ.
And that's what's happened. And that has not been reported. It's thankfully they both survived, but absolute scandal. At the time I had an MP involved as well. I've still got an MP involved today. So
When was this? When did this happen?
That was 2010. 8 years ago.
You know, because you're an intelligent man. No, I don't believe this for a minute, by the way. What I'm going to say, I don't believe for a minute. Yeah. But you know that there will be some people listening to this now, and they will say, well, maybe the social workers were right all along. Yeah. If your wife did that. Some people will listen to this, they will say that. I don't believe it, because I'm absolutely prepared to accept that a woman who was unwell, who needed help, was driven to the point of distraction. I'm prepared to accept that 100%.
I understand how people would think that. However, they're not in the position, or they haven't been through it. The thing is, there is evidence that the trigger was social services.
They were contacting her. Somebody was contacting her while you were at work.
They just pushed and pushed and pushed. They basically bullied a vulnerable lady with mental health issues, and she was, she lost it.
What was she, when she was getting these phone calls that led up to this, obviously this terrible event, what were the nature of those calls, Russ? What was being said to her on the phone?
On the one day, on the Tuesday, it was all about a meeting the following day on the Wednesday. This happened on the Tuesday, and they were basically saying, we're going to take your son no matter what, and there's nothing you could do, and you better get to the meeting tomorrow.
Jesus.
And
could you tell that your wife was seriously under the cosh at that stage.
Oh yeah, not only that though, because of my wife's mental health issues, she's been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, amongst other things, a chronic depression. But the thing is that causes, when you get close to someone like that and you try to help, they tend to they'll do anything to get the spotlight off of them. And she made false allegations against me, so that didn't help. And she also had allegations made against her by social services, by the social worker. So that didn't help as well. So there was like a fortnight of toing and froing with the police and social services, and they brought the court hearing forward, and it was on that day. Yeah, she tried to kill herself and her son. The interesting thing about this is, 2 days before that, I received an email saying that they've suspended and stopped the investigation that was underway.
Is that right?
Oh yes, and that, I understand, that was the only way they could get out of the investigation, was to get us back into court, which is what they did. And this is what I've been fighting ever since, sensibly, of course. I believe in doing things in the right way. Yeah. You've got to be measured in this. It's very emotional, and I can understand how other parents and families and people sort of lose it, and they wonder why they can't get very far in dealing with these people and the system. You've got to rise above it, and that's very hard. And that's something I sort of coach in, and I try to help. And I'm working with professionals. I'm working with all people from a cross section of people, trying to improve the system, because it's broke. It's in dire need of a review, the whole thing. And
it's hidden behind this veil of secrecy, and that's
it is.
And that's why what happened to your wife and your son never made the press, right? That's why it hasn't been in the press, because it can't be in the press. Yeah.
There was a lady before that, a few years before. I'm not sure the date now. 2008, 9, it might have been. Leanne Smith, ex-social worker, went to Spain on the run from social services and killed her children, smothered them apparently in fear of social services. That was in the press, and she's in prison, I understand, in Spain.
Yeah, I know the case, and again, I remember when that was in the press, a lot of people would have said, "You see, obviously the social services were right, because what mother would try to do that?" And I've had a few tweets while we're speaking, and mostly positive, but one or two people are saying, why did she try to harm your son? And maybe there was very good reason for social services to want to be involved. But you're saying, and I'm open to it, that a woman who is vulnerable, was driven to do that.
I can't. What she did was totally wrong. The problem with the system is it's driven by fear. And I'm not just saying that. I was only last Saturday at a workshop with Bristol University, West of England, with some very good people, cross section of people, solicitors, barristers, social workers, people in the care system, parents as well. And we're trying to make the family courts more open and more user-friendly for the people.
Do you think, Russ,
the system's wrong? The system's in dire need of a change.
The system is disgraceful. Do you think if there were not reporting restrictions on these cases, that the social services would have left you alone and your family alone far more quickly? Because if people could report this, I mean, if I'm a reporter and I'm allowed to report on this situation, I would be writing about the family that has been cleared, and I would be writing about the local authority that has been told to leave the family alone, but they won't. I would be writing about that. And of course, if I'm writing about that, the local authority might give up. But they didn't give up in your case. Despite
they didn't give up in my case because I took it to the limit, and I wouldn't let go, and I won't let go now. It's 377 days since I met with senior officials from the council in the safeguarding team, and I met with a representative from my local MP, and they promised us a response within 3 weeks. It's 377 days now, and I've been asking questions for 8 years.
For 8 years, what happened was, it's obvious that your son was taken into care. It's obvious that happened. And was your wife prosecuted? What happened to your wife after that?
My wife ended up in a mental health hospital, and that's where she is now. So she indefinite, and she's getting the treatment that she needed a very long time ago. And
how is she, Russ? How is she now?
I understand she's okay. I'm not in contact with her now. We're now divorced, obviously. What's evident is this should have happened before. If they had any concerns about her mental health and what she was capable of, they could have sectioned her quite easily, but they never did. They ignored that, and they just, like I said before, they focused on the child, and they're not focusing on the actual problem a family might have. And this is in that report as well that's come out today. They talk about poverty. They're talking about the symptoms. They're not looking at the causes. What are the causes?
There's been speculation for years now, and it comes from the victims of this disgraceful, draconian, secret family court system. But the victims have believed for years that there are financial incentives. We know there are financial incentives for the adoption agencies. We know that. We know there are financial incentives for the foster families. But are there financial incentives for social workers to take children out of homes?
I really don't know that. But what I do know from my own experience is, I'll give you an example. During the court process, expert witnesses are brought in. In this particular case, an expert witness was brought in to assess the situation with one report, a cost of something like £5,500. He ended up conducting 3 reports, and he only had to, and it was basically almost cut and paste. It was something really amazing, and it was quite interesting because he only stopped when I had a disagreement with one of the social workers, and she said I said something, and I said, well, no, I did not, and I could prove it. She said, well, how can you prove it? I said, well, I recorded the conversation. And she went absolutely ballistic. And this expert witness asked me, I don't think I could work with you anymore. I understand you recorded a conversation. You're not recording me, are you? And I said, well, why would I do that? And he left it like that. And I thought, wow. And it's quite interesting when you actually not fight back, but you stand your ground. Another example, in court, they don't like you to actually take the witness box. I had to quite robustly request that I give evidence.
When you say they try to discourage, your own representation you're talking about.
Parents are given representation in court, and I had a situation where it was a day after my birthday. So on my birthday, the day before, the social worker, this particular social worker, and my son was singing happy birthday to me. The next day, I was reading a report from her in the courtroom to do with a contact hearing, and it was, well, a load of lies, basically, nonsense, fabricated. So I said, right, I want to give evidence. This is absolutely not true, and I want to say something about it. Oh, you can't do that. And I demanded that I sit in that witness box and be questioned about these allegations. And
then you did, and you were able to refute what was said.
What's quite interesting is 4 weeks later, the said social worker got moved on, and this is what tends to happen. This is only from my own personal experience, and you push back and they get moved on. When all this happened, everyone got moved out. Everyone. It's quite amazing, really. And I don't say things lightly. Anyone who follows me on Twitter will know that I don't believe in knee-jerk reactions. I like to be measured in what I say and how I say it. And if anything I say, I could prove, basically.
Why didn't we? I just want to just quick recap for anybody who's joining us now. I've got Russ Martin on the line. Russ is a parent with his own experience that he's been sharing with us of care proceedings. A terrible, terrible story that he's shared with us, his own experience that's still ongoing. And he's got great insight into how the family courts work because he's been through it, and he now helps families going through it as well, and coaches and trains survivors of it. And Russ, we've probably got about 6 or 7 minutes left on this. Why were you not allowed to retain custody of your son?
Good question. Good question. We still don't know why. There was an allegation that I assaulted my son. That was totally disproved. The year actually before, I was praised all the way through for my parenting skills. The year before, I was given residency of my son. Whilst my wife went away, she decided to move out, and later on she came back. So all the way through these proceedings, I was given a lot of praise and credibility for my parenting skills. And not only that, my son, all the way through, has always said he wanted to be with me, but we were never allowed.
And that's on the record, isn't it? That he wanted to stay with his dad.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, why wouldn't he? I mean, why wouldn't he want to stay with his dad?
Well, yeah. And
how old is he now then? So he's got to be 15, 16 now, is he?
He's 18. So legally now, he's 18. He's now not in care.
Have you seen him, Russ?
Well, I see him regularly. This is another thing, another side to this, Richie, is what they actually do. Me, my son and I, we spent probably 6 years being supervised contact. What a joke that is. Now, we're basically followed around wherever we go by a social worker. It's bizarre, really bizarre. And, they're talking about there's not enough social workers and the workload, which I understand. They've got a massive workload if that's the increase they've got. But I've had situations where I've been in the court and outside the courtroom, 3 social workers there all day long doing nothing. And when it came to a question that needed to be answered yes or no, they're running around with their phones in their hands, can't make a decision. And I find it astonishing when you see that yourself and you go through this.
You've had 8 years of supervised visits while somebody else has been raising your boy.
6 years, yeah.
6 years
of supervised. We've been, at one time they stopped our contact. This is something else that happens, and I predicted it with other families because I've helped. I had at one time about 40 cases on the go around the country. They tend to disrupt contact. They did it with us for 250 days.
How did he do that?
They stopped it. They made false allegations. They're meant to, under Section 34, they can stop contact, but they need to get in court with good reason within 7 days.
So this is somebody who supervised you and your son and has made some allegation in a report.
No, it was the actual the social services as a whole. They decided to stop the contact and
for 9 months. For 9 months, basically.
Yeah, 250 days, and then they built it back up again. But it's staggering, and there's so many threads to this. I could talk all week about this.
No, I know. Listen, we're gonna keep this going because it's vitally important.
Well, there's so many threads to this, Richie. It's what's actually happening behind the closed doors, and parents have legal rights. Parental responsibility is totally diminished. Also, you have things like independent reviewing officers, your IRO, who's meant to be independent, but they're not. They work as part of the local authority, and what I've experienced there is, well, that's staggering. And I've got an investigative background, and I tend to be forensic about it, and I tend to get in there and look it all up and ask the questions, and I'll keep doing that. And they don't like it, and I've been told, that they hate me. Well, so be it. I just want to be treated fairly. I want other people to be treated fairly, and I think the big problem they have in the whole system has got a problem with trust at the moment. If they want to build public trust up, they need to really look within their own.
You see, you talk about public trust, but the public is not aware of this. I've asked I've just sent a message to my guest for this hour, Dean Henderson, to ask him, will he reschedule for tomorrow? Dean's a great guy, he's a great journalist, so I'm sure he will. So I want to keep this going because I want to do a recap here, because this is one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard on this programme. Folks, if you're just joining, I've got Russ Martin on the line. Russ has been through a horrendous situation in the last 10 years. His wife suffered depression, and you'll help me out here now, Russ, if I make any missteps here, but just to do a quick recap. Russ went to ask his local authority for a bit of help because his wife was suffering from depression after their son was born, and she had a history of depression. Not violent at all or abusive, but just fairly serious mental health issues. And initially, the local authority seemed to be happy enough to help out with advice and with care. But later on, they weren't so helpful because they came to intervene and alleged that Russ and his wife, that their boy basically was in danger and needed to be subject to a care order and need to be taken out of the family home, the family environment. This was obviously terrible for Russ to have to deal with this, because his boy, as Russ says, wasn't in any danger or in any physical or mental danger. In fact, they actually took for a brief time originally. Initially, they were able to take his son, but 24 hours later, they had to return the boy after the family court judge said, well, no, there's no need for this boy to be taken out of the home. But amazingly enough, they kept coming back, with care orders and for care visits, where they were alleging that, more and more and more that Russ's son was in fact in danger. And this got so bad, and it drove, as Russ has told this story to us today, this got so bad, and him not being in the home during the day because he's working, that his wife was getting phone calls constantly from people connected to the local authority saying that they were going to come and take the boy and take him into care. That had resulted in a terrible thing happening, that in 2010 Russ's ex-wife attempted to take her own life and to take her son, Russ's son's life as well. And she went into a psychiatric facility, and Russ's boy was actually taken into care in 2010 and not left with him where he could raise him, because he's not broken the law. He hasn't represented a threat or doesn't represent any serious risk of harm to his boy. But since 2012, effectively, Russ's only visitation, or his only contact with his son, has been through supervised visits, because the boy was taken into care. I haven't messed that up, Russ. That's what you've told us, right?
Yeah. That's the sort of long and short of it.
That's the long. It's obviously more complicated than that, but that's basically it. And what I really want to talk about, and we have plenty of time now. He's 18. He's not in care anymore. What does he think about what's been happening over the last 6 to 8 years?
He's what I've discovered dealing with several cases, and obviously my own personal experiences. Children are they're placed in there and they sort of sit on the fence. The only way they end up they got to navigate their way through all of this. Over the years, from the very beginning, from the outset, my son has said he always wanted to live with me. He's wrote that in letters, in notes, in all sorts of ways. It's all been ignored and denied. Now he's 18. As he said to me only a few months ago, he said, "Dad, don't worry." He said, "I'll be 18 soon, and then I'll be free.
And I'm coming home to you."
Yeah, and then I'll be free. Well, it's not over yet. It's he's not. They're putting him into a what they call a supported lodgings. Now, so this person, a friend of the foster carer, will rent him a room, and she, whoever it is, gets money for that to pay the rent. It's bizarre. And we're talking, when I say...
It's an industry, right?
Oh, yeah, it's all money, wheels within wheels, generating money and funding.
Because you talked earlier on, and I should have picked up on this more, but again, sometimes I incorrectly assume knowledge. I'm assuming that the listeners know this, but I shouldn't have done that. You touched on something very important earlier on. These family court proceedings are filled with testimonies from experts that are hired, often getting 5, 10, 15, 20,000 pounds a time to come and testify. That's not an exaggeration. So, not only the agencies, the adoption agencies, the families who get paid to foster children, that is an astronomical amount of money. But the legality, the system itself, and the court proceedings itself, it's basically a cash cow. A cash cow.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it. In fact, I said to the expert witness at one stage, we were at court and he gave evidence, and I sort of said, "Well, why are you? Why is there a need for another report?"
Yeah.
And he just smiled at me, and I sort of made the sound ka-ching, Yeah. I said, "More money in it," and he just smiled. And I thought,
you see, because our listeners will be saying, go back to when you were open and candid, and your wife, to her credit, was open and candid about her depression and her problems. Go back to that. If anybody had any concerns about the welfare of your boy, 7 years old as he was at the time, what in a fair and just and real and honest and loving world, somebody would get a completely independent expert, a man or a woman, a kindly old psychologist or psychiatrist who would have a few sessions with your son, and they would say, "Well, look, children are resilient. The boy's all right. He's got a good dad. His mum is going through shit at the moment, but she'll get through it. She'll get help and everything will be okay. The last thing in the world we need to do is to disrupt the family." That's what should happen in a just, caring, normal, non-psychotic society. An old man or an old woman would look at your boy and say, "He's all right. Yeah, it can't be easy for him because his mum is going through it, but it's the best thing in the world for him to be with his family." That's what should have happened in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah, that's what should have happened. And in fairness to my wife, at the time she actually she was getting help through a counsellor. The other thing regarding my wife that I haven't mentioned yet is she had an addiction with codeine. And this is another interesting subject, actually, because this was prescribed codeine, which dated back to her pregnancy through the GP.
Why did she have migraines? Why did she need codeine?
Yeah, pain relief.
Migraines.
During pregnancy, migraine, all that sort of thing. But it went on. So anyway, she went to she went to a counsellor, and as part of that, well, we later on, what I know now is the counsellor was actually conversing with social services.
How can that happen? Again, listeners will be listening to this in other parts of the world, and they don't know anything about this UK system. How can the people that you put your heart on the line to, that you pour your emotions out to, and you say, listen, I had a very difficult pregnancy, I'm going through a terrible time, I might be suicidal, I'm all over the place, my relationship, maybe your wife, God love her, maybe she was saying this to somebody, maybe she was saying my relationship is in the balance, everything, I need help. How can it be legally justifiable for them to go and do that? And
this is what was happening.
How?
And interestingly enough, I met with one of the team, like the drug and alcohol abuse team. I met with her father, and I met with them on my own as a supportive member of the family. They like to meet, and at no time did they ever say they had any concerns about our son. So you would have thought that would have been an opportunity to discuss that if there was, so say, concerns. There was nothing raised whatsoever, and it is quite astonishing to think that you go in to a confidential counselling session only later and it's used against you
for help. You're asking for help. You're saying, I know I've got a problem, I need some help, I want to be there for my son and for my husband, I want to deal with this, give me some fucking help, excuse my language.
Yes,
and somebody goes to a local authority and basically rats you out and says that you're some sort of nutcase who might be a serious threat to the child, who obviously is not in danger. You're his dad, you're there. I mean, I can't imagine how difficult it was for you dealing with your wife's problems. And
it was horrendous. And I mean, that's another story, that is, dealing with that, living with someone with serious mental health issues. It's something I'm quite passionate about, is mental health. And I think that's been steered down the wrong road in a lot of ways. It's being misrepresented.
Of course it is. Absolutely. And they say that they want to destigmatise it. They don't. What they want to do is they want to get the whole country onto antidepressants is what they want. This nonsense, we want to destigmatise it, of course, because they want everybody rushing to their doctor, oh great, it's destigmatised. Oh, I'm feeling a bit fed up, brilliant. Here's whatever it is, here's some Prozac or whatever. Prozac.
This is what they try to
destigmatise,
What they tried to do at the early stages when this all happened was that the consultant psychiatrist actually suggested during a meeting, which I was not present, because they had these meetings that you're not allowed to go to. She suggested that I should be contained, and that was
contained. How? That you're a problem that needs to be contained.
Oh yeah, because I tend to say it as it is, and if I don't agree with something, I will say so, measured, of course. I mean, and not just for the hell of it. I will raise the flag, and that's what they didn't like, and that's what they were scared of, because they all knew they screwed up. Basically, they've made monumental mistakes, and it was preventable, and they failed the family. They failed on quite a few points.
I've never heard. I mean, I've heard some bad things from people. I mean, I've heard some horrendous things. I mean, I've had the filmmaker Emma Ibbitson, who's a friend of mine on this program, whose child was taken because, and this is not a lie, because they put her in a road traffic safety film. This is not a joke, like, honest to God. I had Luke Maguire on, whose child was definitely injured by a vaccine, and that's not to say that the kid was anti-vaccination or anything like that, but serious problems. And it led to the child being taken away. I had a Portuguese lady on called Yolanda, who was with a guy called Leon, who were on the programme. Again, child was taken in very dubious circumstances, and these things cannot be publicised. I imagine you're in some, well, I mean, the boy's 18 now, thank God. But, if he wasn't, you'd be in serious, potentially serious problems speaking to me now about this,
18, He's 18 now, and I am actually working with other people in the media, and that it's under investigation. Let's put it that way. But I've done everything in a fair and proper manner. I've investigated this throughout, and I continue to do so. From my son's point of view, he's also willing to talk about this.
How does he feel about his mum now? I mean, it must be complicated for him. I mean, I'm 43 and I've got problems dealing with some of the things that happened to me when I was younger, which are not important at all, certainly not now. But he's 18. How does he feel about his mum? Does he understand that his mum was in a bad way?
This is the other thing, that during the process, they've actually given contact with her. And he's forgiven her.
Marvellous.
And he's a fantastic person. He really is. He's brilliant. And, he never belonged in care. And I know there's other children that don't belong in care. It is a crazy system. It really is. I mean, and I've seen it. I've seen it. They put them, as they get older, they put them in what they call training flats. Dark, dismal places. It's like to train them into independence. I mean, independent living is something else. It really is. It's staggering.
Let me read a couple of tweets.
Sure.
Russ, just do a very quick time check. The wonderful and lovely Dean Henderson is gripped by this, by the way, and will be on the programme tomorrow. We're going to stay with Russ Martin. Russ has been describing a terrible, terrible experience that he and his son and his ex-wife have had over the last 10 years. His wife has been dealing with for many years serious depression and mental health problems. She was very forthcoming about those. Basically, social services attempted to intervene in their family, in Russ's family, and alleged that they needed to take his son into care because his wife represented a threat to the safety and the well-being of his son, which Russ has explained that she didn't represent any threat to his safety and his well-being. And despite the fact that the judges hearing these, order proceedings, these care order proceedings, said in the beginning time and again, there's no need to be intervening here. The family is fine. They're going to work through their problems. The stress of it, the constant harassment, and who can understand what it's like for a woman to be confronted by the police who takes away her son when she's already going through very serious emotional and psychological difficulties and distress. Who can understand what it might have done to her? The harassment never ended, and it led to Russ's ex-wife attempting to take her own life and attempting to kill their son, which is a terrible thing. But Russ has explained in great and very compassionate detail why he believes that that would never have happened if the family had been left alone, and why he believes that his ex-wife was driven to that. I'm not going to ignore the fact that there are listeners saying that they don't buy it. And Russ is man enough, he's happy enough to hear from the naysayers. There are people listening to the programme who are tweeting saying that, maybe social services were right all along. This is very complicated and I'm not sure that Russ is right here. But a lot of people are saying that they do absolutely have sympathy with Russ. And I'm going to nail my colours to the mast, not because I'm a sucker. I know I'm not. I'm a very cynical old hack. I've been making radio programmes and TV programmes for years. I've heard it all. Haven't heard this, to be honest. But I believe Russ. I believe what he's telling me. Faisal tweets, the biggest problem I have with how the authorities acted here is the degree to which the child's wishes were disregarded. There's a fundamental issue here with human rights not extending to children. That's why I made that point. If we lived in a fair and honest and loving, compassionate world, a judge would have said, listen, sure, don't we know John Smith or Josephine Smith, they're brilliant, they've been dealing with children for years. Let the boy spend a few hours speaking to Josephine Smith or John Smith, and then Josephine and John would have come back and said, no, everything is fine, this kid is fine, he's very upset about the fact that his mum is unwell, but he doesn't need to be taken away from her. And that's there's a fundamental breakdown here, and I think it's far more sinister than a lot of people think. You've blown me away by telling us that you're a boy, and I can understand if you don't want to name him or give us his first name, Russ. I can understand that totally. You've blown me away by saying that he's been in contact and is in contact with his mother. That's incredible. How's that gone? How was
it was supervised, I understand, yeah, it's gone well. My concern obviously is with the psychological impact of that for himself and for his mother as well, obviously, because that, what she did and the whole thing is that's a massive psychological challenge.
Of course it is, because while you can express sympathy for your ex-wife, and while she needed love and needs love and probably needs help today, and while you don't blame her for what happened, the fact is it happened and it had an impact on the lad. Of course it did.
I do blame. She did it. So yeah, she was in a psychotic state at the time. Something I didn't mention that led up to this as well is in 2007 she lost. In 2006 she lost her eldest son to suicide at the age of 24. Then the following year she lost her mother. Then she lost her auntie and her uncle the following year. So so you think about it, for a balanced person who has no or minor maybe mental health problems or no mental health problems, to have multiple bereavements, to deal with that is enough for any person.
Sounds like a perfect storm, Russ, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it says in one report, it was a pivotal moment where her mental health deteriorated. But they knew this, and they were told during the court process to have sensitivity and to treat her with care and sensitivity because of her condition. But it totally went out the window.
Do you still love her, Russ?
Do I love her?
Yeah.
I do, in a way. I understand. We went through thick and thin. She had multiple miscarriages, and we went through a lot of difficulties with her other children. So we've been through a lot, and I've learned a lot as well, because I was being abused by her, and that's another thing about what, like in this report that the BBC has actually published today about domestic violence. It's always the man, it seems, but there are cases when it's the other way around, and it's it's female on male.
She did get physical with you sometimes, did she?
Oh yes. But
not with the. I don't want to sound like a smart arse now, but I've got to say, but not with your son, right?
No, but we got a situation where even when, like in this particular case, even when like the perpetrator actually admits to assaulting, is sort of ignored because it don't seem to fit the narrative. That's what I've picked up on over the years.
Like that certain facts are just omitted because there's already a predetermined conclusion. Already, there's a conclusion that they've arrived at. So anything that might throw a bit of grey area over that, well, we just ignore that. I've heard that said before as well.
Yeah, it is. They work on like a narrative, and I've actually witnessed. I've experienced this myself, whereby I was stopped from attending school meetings, and then suddenly a year or so later I was invited back to the school meetings, and I discovered that the social services have been running one narrative and the school had the same concerns that I had about my son's anxiety and stress, etc. So they were running one narrative, but keeping me out of the system because they knew I would just say it as it is in a measured way. But I would be looking at developing the contact and developing the situation, so we had more time together. They didn't want that, and
Do you know anything about the family that did he stay with one family in the 6 years, or was there more than one family?
There was two. The other thing is he was literally around the corner from me, literally in walking distance.
That's very unusual. Why?
Yeah, very unusual.
How did that happen?
Very, very. It's psychologically, wow. It's I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Psychologically, yeah, it's mind blowing. And for him, for both of us. But yeah, the first foster carers, it's transpired now that over time he's left them. He left them about 2 years ago now, and went somewhere else. And they kept saying to me, well, social services did, well, there's nothing's happened. And I said, well, something's happened because he's had to move. But they wouldn't tell me. But it's all sort of come out now. He wasn't treated very nicely.
The foster family didn't treat him very nicely.
Yeah, not very well.
In terms of specifically,
he was asking for help. You can only imagine what he's been through. And at the early stages, he's sort of he was saying things like he felt really low, and he felt suicidal, and they basically just shouted at him, and saying, "Oh, get a grip," and all this, and totally the wrong thing to do, of course. And it just went on from there. And he ended up leaving to another set of foster carers, which again is around the corner. They're a lot better.
Is he there now? He is, even though he's 18. He's still there. He is.
Yeah, he's there at the moment. He's in a transitional period now. He's going to be moving out soon.
And you're seeing him all the time now? Because
yeah. I'm seeing him. Yeah, I see him whenever I want. Yeah. So it's gone from one extreme to the other. And this is the other thing, Richie, is the whole process is crazy, because they talk about assessments. He wanted to see other members of the family, like his aunties. He wanted to do that. He asked for that. He requested that. And over the years, they've ignored him. And then they said, oh, there's assessments to be done. So they went to meetings. I took them to 3 meetings. Then they said, I was told by the social worker, oh, there's no such assessment. Now, I've met with independent social workers, and I've showed them the evidence, and they said, well, they would have set up that contact within a matter of one phone call over a week, and they would have had it sorted. It's staggering.
So why do you think they worked so hard to prevent him from meeting his aunts and his uncles?
Well, there's definitely there's something not right, because what they've done, and even the second foster care has actually said to me and to us at meetings where, oh, he's been isolated. And well, yeah, he has. I mean, he's been stopped from seeing his best friends out of school. He's over the years, he's been stopped seeing his friends, his family members, and human rights, like someone was saying on Twitter, human rights have been breached. There's no doubt about that. Even when he turned 17, he's entitled to certain legal rights, and they were all sort of brushed under the carpet.
Like what now? Because some of our listeners will wonder, what sort of rights should he have when he's 17?
One thing, children in care, they're entitled to some sort of advocacy. So they're entitled to someone to speak on their behalf, and to make sure that they're looked after. So their wish, as they call it, their wishes and feelings are met.
Right, okay. It's almost like a legal representative, so that they can make sure that, okay.
Yeah, I mean, even at the age of 15 or 16, he would be entitled to legal representation. And children are in a difficult situation where they're sort of, they're put in, they don't know what to believe. So they tend to just navigate through, they sort of float through, and they say what everyone wants them to hear.
Right.
And that's what tends to happen. So yeah, but now he's, you know, he's his own person. So, you know, he's got a job, and yeah.
I was going to ask you, next question was, you know, how did he do in school? What does he want to do? What is he doing, you know?
Well, in school, he struggled a bit. Before, he was actually brilliant in school.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
He really was. And obviously, this has had a major effect on him. But yeah, he did very well in school. And he left school at 16. He's now working part-time. But very sensible person, very measured in his thoughts, and yeah, he's obviously he sees things differently.
Of course
he's got his own perspective on it.
I'd imagine he's fairly quiet, is he? I'd imagine he's a fairly reserved lad, is he?
Oh yes, he is. He is very quiet, and he's.
Tell me this, Russ. All along the way, he's been asking to go home to his dad. All along the way.
He has, yeah. He would. When he was in hospital, I mean, it was literally touch and go. 2 days solid in hospital, and they took over the ward. These social services. Wow. And anyway, during that time, a few weeks later it was, he recovered, thankfully, and he's in hospital, and he turns around and he says, I want the nurse. So I give him the button to press for the nurse. I said, is everything okay? He said, yeah. And the nurse came down and said, oh, you know, what do you want? And he said, I want my dad to stay with me overnight to give me comfort. So the nurse, and there was a doctor there at the time, they all agreed with that, and they turned around to me and said, would you do that? I said, of course. And we looked at the 2 social workers there, sat at the foot of the bed, and they said, well, we'll have to talk about it. It never happened. Staggering, never happened. They wouldn't let me. And they stopped his grandfather from going in to visit him. My grandfather was actually, his grandfather was actually threatened with being thrown out of the hospital. And at the time he would have been 80, 83. You know, deaf aid in both years, and a walking stick. So
where's the humanity? How does this happen?
Well, there ain't no humanity, I'm afraid. There's the empathy. It is staggering. And this is what people don't understand. People that haven't been through this, people that haven't actually sat in meetings and witnessed how the process works, or don't, as the case may be, they don't understand it. They can only come up with assumptions, and like it's that assumption, oh, well, there's no smoke without fire. Well, you know, who's got the matches? It's terrible.
Victims of this system have said to me before, amazingly, 2 different people have said the same thing to me, and these 2 people never met. They said, I've had 2 lives, Richie. I had the life before this happened to me, the life when I believed in justice and fair play and decency. And now I have this life when I know what the state can do to you if it wants to.
Yeah. It's for me personally. I mean, I used to train security officers and security managers. Part of that training would include criminal investigation, statement and report writing, investigative skills, and then so there's standards. Now, so you've got those standards in mind, and then you think you're dealing with professionals, as they call themselves. And I'm not saying it's all of them, because there's not. There are good people out there, but the bad that's being done is putting the good into the darkness. And then you come across this, and it is staggering. I find it absolutely astonishing that people could sit around a table and make a judgment on people that they've not even met, and where
destroy their lives.
Yeah, where parents are not allowed in meetings like strategy meetings, they're not allowed. They're not allowed in there. So they're talked about. Judgments are made on them or about them. It could well be false allegations, and whatever the allegations are, many of them are not actually investigated or substantiated, and it leads to very bad things.
Well, evidence, we know that evidence can be presented to a judge, evidence that hasn't been handed to the accused parent. This is the thing. When I heard this 4 years ago, I found it hard to comprehend. It stayed with me for days and days.
I'll give you an example there, Richie.
Go ahead,
From my own experience, I was sent 2 statements from my wife to give to the judge, which I did through the correct channels. So I give them as instructed to her solicitor at the time, who then attempted to give them to the local authority so they could go in the court bundle, but it was refused. So they didn't do it. Those statements stayed out of the court bundle. They didn't even get in before the judge. And for myself, my solicitor at the time, he was instructed to take statements from 2 witnesses, which he just basically delayed. He was just obfuscation. It was all the way through.
This is your own. This is your own legal representative, and he's supposed to take witness statements that will be favourable to you.
Yeah,
and he won't do it.
Well, I actually went and got the statements myself and presented them to the court. They weren't accepted. During the court session, they actually said, well, it's not about right or wrong, or whether, who's right and wrong, they were basically saying. And they said it's about the perception of the child. And the thing is, during these court processes, the child is not actually given an opportunity to say anything or speak to the judge, or it's all done through the guardian. And because of the severity of this case, obviously it was like a closed book. The final hearing was tabled for 4 days. It was over within 2 hours. Terrible. And there was never any consideration for my feelings or my trauma during this. It was horrific. It was horrific for years. It was horrific. Terrible. And I looking back, I don't know how I got through it, actually. I just sort of coasted through it. It was just absolutely horrific.
Do you think have you been through, counselling or psychotherapy yourself? Because it's bound to have had seismic impact on you.
Well, it's an interesting one. That is what I did straight away, because I knew I could go either way. I could either let myself go down and get sucked into this vacuum and end up depressed and never get out of it, or I could. I realised straight away I'm fighting injustice here. I really need to get a grip of myself. So I went to my GP and said, look, this is he knew the situation. I said, I'll take any counselling, 1-to-1, anything. I'm up for it. And he put me on to 1-to-1 counselling. At first, he actually he did say to me, well, I could give you some tablets. I said, look, I don't want tablets. I just want justice. And I refused. I don't want tablets. I'll do therapy work, and it's good to talk. It is. I believe in that if it's done in the right way. And I did. I went on a course of 1-to-1 therapy, and it was established. It was absolutely jaw-dropping. She couldn't believe it, the stuff that I was encountering at the time.
She might have needed to have some therapy herself after hearing your story, and I don't say that for a laugh.
Quite astonishing. And then they established I didn't need, or she established I didn't need any sort of like anger management or anything like that. So I said, well, what's left? She said, well, there ain't no 1-to-1. She said, what about group? therapy. I said, yeah, okay, then I'll go along to that. And I went along to that. And it was quite interesting, actually, because I met a lot of other people there that had all sorts of problems. And I always remember one person that he was 65 and he didn't know where he was. He had an identity problem. Interestingly enough, he was adopted as a child. And he's had several businesses. And yeah, it's so that helped me. And yeah, and that was the end of that session. And I've just carried on. I've kept myself fit. I've during the process as well, something I haven't mentioned, during the process I lost my job because of this. That's staggering, that was. I put a proposal into the court to change the contact arrangements to allow me to go back to work. And it was basically everyone was in agreement apart from the local authority. So I had to make a choice between seeing my son or going back to work. So I opted for my son, of course. And yeah.
Everybody was in agreement except the local authority.
Yeah.
And didn't the judge have the right there to impose that?
No. I remember the day and my barrister's on the phone to my boss. And she's saying, no, he's going to end up losing his job if he can't go back. And the judge basically said, well, it's down to the local authority. And they said, no, that we're not accepting his proposal. And all it was a simple proposal to allow me contact during the weekend rather than the weekdays to allow me to get back into work, because I was a training manager looking after in a big security company, basically. So I was working Monday to Friday training people through the week. And I needed to get back into work, and I would have went back gradually, like 1, 2, 3 days, and then build myself up because of the trauma. But they said no, so that was that. And a few months later, they had to terminate my employment, which I can totally understand. And they were very supportive, my company. Yeah, staggering. So I ended up, Richie, unemployed for 6 years. 6 years.
And how did you survive, Russ? Were you eating into savings? How did you survive?
How did I survived? Well, I ended up with I was on ESA because of the post-traumatic stress, and I just fought through it. I read a lot. I campaigned a lot. At one time, I was working with John Hemming, Justice for Families. I worked with him for a while. I've taken on cases. I worked with other people independently and determined to change the system, because this is not talked about. It's not, this wasn't, and how it was reported locally, actually, it was, incidents occurred. We brought in social services. Well, no, it was an incident occurred because of social services and their overzealous intervention, and I'm not for 1 minute saying there's not a need for child protection. Of course there is, but there needs to be a balance, and I think they've gone way over kilter now.
Councils are paid millions and millions through this. This is the thing, you see, and it's not just about that. I think it's even more sinister, but I'm not going to get into that. We've got about four or five, probably 4 minutes left before I've got to start wrapping it up. It's an incredible story.
But so
it really is.
I'm working. I'm very serious about working with anyone, groups, individuals that are determined in changing the system. And I know there's in the Bristol area, there's a thing called the Transparency Project. Very important work is going on with Bristol University and other people, and that's what needs to happen. It needs to be focused, it needs to be credible, and like comprehensive information and research to make the changes. But these changes need to happen pretty quick. It's the way it's going. It's a can of worms. It really is.
With the money involved, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds, billions even. We know that some of the adoption agencies are worth billions. You have to question the veracity of the report, because you can't imagine that 2.4 million people have reported to local authorities that they feel that a child is in danger. You've got to imagine that a lot of these reports are setups. They're staged reports by people involved in this industry. And people will say that's a conspiracy theory, but it makes perfect sense that a lot of these reports will be staged, that they're not genuine reports. They're false reports by families that are picked on, families like yours. Oh, look, the mum has had a serious history of mental illness. That's marvellous. We can get in there, we can have that child.
Well, I think there's obviously, like, there was, I've forgotten the name, Kids Company, that was it, in Bristol.
Yeah.
3 million quid they'd done, government funding. And, they were saying at the time, one of 600 children that need our help. And, the thing is, it's sort of the intention. It's like they're saying about there's less social workers, or there's more social workers in, but they ain't got the experience. Well, no one. I think most people go into that sort of work with the right intentions, but they soon discover that they're in a whole world of, sort of corruption in a way. And I'm not into conspiracy theory myself. I'm into conspiracy fact. I'm very sort of focused on investigative work, and when I get told by a solicitor that they've conspired to make sure you don't see your son, well, I knew that anyway. This has happened, and it's happened in other cases.
Well, because there was no reason for your son not to be raised by you, none whatsoever.
No. We still don't know now, and really.
And can I ask you this in the last couple of minutes that we have,
Sure.
Russ? And first of all, and I mean it, mate, thanks for sharing your story with us. You didn't have to. And you've been incredibly candid and really honest. And I'm amazed, that you can tell it and you don't sound bitter or hateful. I'm sure you're still angry, but you don't. Can I ask you this? Of course you're angry. Your son might decide that the state has a case to answer. Could we see in years to come the taxpayer having to foot the bill, because lads like your son decide, well, hang on a second, my human rights were basically thrown out the window. I should have spent my teenage years with my father, and they stole me, they robbed my childhood from me, I had no say in it. Therefore, somebody's got to answer for that. Is the state looking down the barrel of future litigation, like we've seen in the Republic of Ireland, like we've seen in America, for children that were abused, but abused by the state? What do you think?
Yeah, well, it could well be. And that's something that's interesting, because in the BBC report that's come out today, it talks about facts and figures, but it don't actually talk about the money that is spent by local authorities to defend their reputation. They're very hot on reputation management, and they spend a lot of money defending such cases. So when parents or families and people tend to put a claim in against them, they're quick to respond, and they'll throw all the money they can at it. But that don't seem to get mentioned, and it's taxpayers' money. And this is the other thing, is I'm a taxpayer, I pay my council tax, I'm working, and it's a bit sick really. I'm paying for my local authority to abuse me and my family. That's how it seems. It's quite staggering, and other people are in the same boat. So you're paying money into a system that if it was any other company, they'll be on Watchdog or something.
Yeah,
they would be shut down. They really would. They'll be really shamed. But it's not. And they are a service provider at the end of the day, and that's something that's drastically missing, and they seem to forget. In reality, we're the customer. We're the end user. We we go to them for help, and you get treated terribly, and it's got to change. And I'm determined to change it.
Well, I want to give your Twitter handle out to people.
Sure.
Russ can be found on Twitter. It's Russ Russ Martin, but his Twitter name is @I. That's the letter I. Russ Martin. So it's @I Russ Martin. And if you've been affected by this, I think Russ won't mind if you drop him a line and let him know. I think we'll talk again, Russ. I have no doubt about it. I'd like
to do that. Yeah,
absolutely. I want to sincerely wish you and your son and your ex-wife all the very best in the world, Russ. You know, I think I can't even begin to imagine how you've dealt with all of that.
Well, I just keep saying great days lay ahead, and they do. We've got this far, and we'll carry on. And very positive. My son and I, and my wife, she's getting the help she needs, and no doubt, things are developing. So it's.
We wish her all the very best, and I mean absolutely. That. Incredibly candid, Russ. You don't hear. Again, I've said this before. You should really be telling this to a BBC presenter or a Channel 4 presenter.
There's. All I will say on that, Richie, at the moment, there's work underway. I think there's ways and means of doing things, and I'm very much into networking, and I'll work with anyone. As I said, I'm doing some work down here in the Bristol area. I'll go anywhere, really. I'd go anywhere. I'd walk. I'll crawl there if needs be to get this sorted out, because people need to be treated fairly, and it's not a fair playing field. It really isn't.
No, it's not.
The family court system is not, and there is some serious work underway, and I hope that continues and develops.
Well, stay in touch with me through that, and in the new year we'll get into more specifics about it. It was important to get your own story on the record here, particularly on this programme. We've covered this so much over the last few years, and I want to keep covering it. I don't know what good I can do by covering it, but I want people to understand what's going on. 30,000 children are being taken a year from their families, and it seems to me that in most cases it's unnecessary. Russ is right. There are children being battered, there are children being sexually abused. There has to be an intervention. Nobody's denying that, but I think in the vast majority of cases, this is a multi-million, it's £1 billion a year industry, and it's filled. It's fraught with corruption and sleaze and wrongdoing, and it has to be exposed. Russ, we're bang out of time, mate. Again, the best to you, to your lad, and to your ex-wife, and I look forward to following your journey in the future, mate. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, Richie. Thanks for your time.
Not at all. It was an absolute honour. That was Russ Martin, folks, live on the line to us from Bristol there, talking very candidly about what happened to him and to his son and to his ex-wife in the last 10 years. Dean Henderson will be on the programme tomorrow. Neil Sanders will be on with me as well. There was the only thing to do was to carry on with that, because that's just staggering to me. If you came in on the end of that, it'll be on podcast real soon. It'll be on YouTube later on as well. That was Wednesday's Richie Allen Show. Thanks for listening. We'll leave you with some George Michael. Talk to you tomorrow, right? At the usual time of 5 p.m. for Thursday's programme. Until then, thanks again to Russ. Thank you for listening. Bye now.